Jeez. A little warm, a little spatter.
What's up, everybody? My name is Elliott, and I'm back with the Car Trek Maserati, which also happens to be the cheapest Maserati in the USA. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. This car is going to be a huge, huge money pit, but I'm here to tell you that I think this car can be the race car for the road that it already wants to be. With any project of this magnitude, it's very important to take stock of where you are at financially before beginning. Now, I think that I got a screaming good deal on this car. I bought it for just $5,000, which is less than most used Priuses go for. And for that price, I got an Italian-bodied car with a Ferrari V8 of 6-speed manual and a Trident on the front of it. But just because I think I got a really good deal on it doesn't mean that the market agrees with me. There's only really one way to find out what the market thinks, and that's by taking this car over to the boys in blue. And no, I'm not talking about the police, I'm talking about Carmax, which I guess makes it the boys in blue and yellow. But regardless, let's go see what the people at Carmax actually think this car is worth before we make any other decisions about this car. But before we head out, I probably need to grab something to take along with us. It's always good to have one of these before setting out anywhere. All right, I think we're ready. Let's head over to Carmax. All right, I am back. I just got the appraisal from the folks at Carmax. And before we unveil this, I think it's fair to note that Carmax really only deals in cars that they can accurately price. They look at past auctions and do a comparison of what this car's worth compared to what else is on the market. And there's just not that many of these going up for market, let alone in this kind of shape. With that said, let's get to the offer. Carmax offered me $3,500, which as a Maserati owner, I say is a total spit in the face. But realistically, let's look at this as Carmax does. Carmax just isn't interested in having a car like this on their lot. They can't keep it. They can't really sell it. So they just kind of gave me this offer as a kind of a thank you for coming in, but here you go. And that's fine. I guess I'm not surprised. I was definitely hoping for a little bit more, but you know, what are you gonna do? This car isn't really the Carmax type of product. Now that I know I guess I'm going to be keeping it, let's get the car back and figure out what to do now. Okay, good. It started. That's always a good thing in this car. Well, we made it back from Carmax in one piece, and luckily, we didn't need to use this, which is always a successful journey in my book. Now, unfortunately, Carmax did not think this car was worth as much as I personally think it's worth, so I guess I'm stuck with it. First order business, now that I'm keeping it, is to change the oil. But like most things with Italian cars, ain't nothing nice and easy. This is a Ferrari dry-sump V8, and the procedures are just a little bit different than your standard wet sump change in a Chevy Impala or something like that. So let me get out of these clothes, and I'll see you over there at the lift, and we can change this fluid. So the next step is to take this oil fill cap off of the reservoir, just so it aids in the draining. Man, made me feel weak right there. Now that the cap's off, we can get the car up in the air and then get access to the other two drain bolts and the oil filter. So let's jack the car up. Okay, the car is up in the air, and the first thing that you need to do is remove the little front piece, which, as you can see, I have already done. And it's just got like a bunch of these 10mm screws up front and then some 7mm in the back. A lot of the forums say that you have access to the drain plug for the reservoir with the cover still on, with this hole here, but as you can see, that's like as big as the nut would be. So I feel like you'd still spill oil all over this thing. I just didn't want to deal with it, so I took it all the way off. It's easy enough to do. Underneath the car, you can see this is the oil reservoir. This is the drain nut we need to drain. Over here, where the traditional oil pan would be, is another drain nut.
And you know that because it says Scarico Olio, which I looked up means oil drain in Italian. The next thing that you need to do is get the oil filter off, which is right up there. And as you can see, almost all of these things are on top of other things, so oil is going to spill down and it could be a huge mess. But that's part of doing it yourself sometimes. So we're going to give it a couple more minutes to cool off so I don't absolutely scald myself while I'm doing this. And then we'll get the oil out and show you the process, as well as putting the oil back in, which is also different than in a traditional wet sump system. So we're all learning something new here. Okay, so the first bolt we need to remove is this one. This is a 22 millimeter screw. But as you can see, if I were to drain this, it would drain right onto the lift. This is what some people would say is the problem with the 4-post lift, is it kind of gets in the way. So hopefully, if we're lucky, this oil catch will extend over just enough for me to catch it. If we're lucky. So, moment of truth, let's drain this oil. This could be hot, which is why I'm wearing the gloves. All right, here it comes. All right, hey, the pan's catching it. Look at all that. That is a ton of oil coming out at once. And again, part of the difference here is because it's in a reservoir tank versus an oil pan. All right, while this is draining, we've moved it to a pan so that way we could free up the little oil catch thing. But this is really the first time we've gotten to see the car in the air. I gotta say it's in rough shape cosmetically on the outside here. You can kind of see where Tavarish or somebody apparently winched it up somewhere and really rubbed through the wrap, rubbed through the original paint. You can also see here where it says Maserati. If you look closely, this is just a nasty crack in there. Kind of unfortunate because it really looks good at a distance. Let's look underneath the rest of the car. You can kind of see these cats have been hollowed out, like because they're all crushed down. They go straight. What would be normally a pretty large center muffler has been replaced with these like Flowmasters, which is cool. It contributes to this car's awesome sound. Moving back, everything looks really good underneath here. Mechanically, it's in great shape. It just is a little rough on the outside. All of the bushings everywhere are just absolutely toasted. So all of those will need to be replaced at some point, and this boot is leaking a little bit. Another thing worth mentioning is that this oil change procedure would cost upwards of $500 at a Maserati dealer. So it's no surprise that I wouldn't take it there. One, Wichita doesn't have a Maserati dealer, and two, this was the cheapest Maserati in the United States. I have a little bit of mechanical know-how, and with a little bit of Googling, this process seemed fairly simple, something I could easily do for $100 rather than $500 at a Maserati dealer. A lot of the cost is actually the fact that this thing holds so much oil. I mean, at $10 a quart, and it holds a little bit more than 8 quarts, I mean, that's almost $100 right there. Regardless, a lot of times, even on supercars and exotics like this, the oil changes are something that you could do yourself as long as you have the proper equipment and tools. Is remove this one and see how much oil comes out of it. Honestly, that can be probably done by hand after this. Try to move these O2 sensors out of the way. Jeez. This is part of the DIY procedure. That just absolutely spattered out of there. A little warm, a little spatter. But man, I did not expect there to be that much oil in there. I thought it was gonna be like a little bit of leftover oil. This is probably why the Maserati techs charge so much for this, because they just get annihilated with oil every time they undo that plug. That was crazy. So let this drain out, and once it gets down to a slow trickle, we'll pop the oil filter out and we'll be good. I'll need to wipe myself off here in a second. This can't be any messier than last time, but boy is it hotter. Little movie secret, I've pre-loosened it. But not enough. Here it comes, all over the steering rack. And as you can see, which is actually a good sign, This is a genuine Maserati oil filter. It's not like a Fram or something else that you'd get at AutoZone. And it will be replaced with a genuine Maserati oil filter. And these are different because they're under a lot more pressure than a traditional wet sump engine. So it actually does matter to put the correct oil filter back in on a dry sump system such as this. So now all of the plugs are open. We'll let it drain until it's not dripping anymore. And then we can put some fresh oil in there and get this thing on the road. All right, we've got our oil filter partially filled, our ring lubricated, and now it's time to install it in this really awkward location. All right, and we lucked out. No oil leaked out from our partially filled filter. Now it says to get it like hand tight and then tighten it down 30 Newton meters. And I'd call that hand tight. And now we can use a tool and get it tightened down to approximately 30 Newton meters worth. All right, so the next part of the oil change procedure is to reinstall the drain plug on the reservoir. Now I looked into it, and Maserati doesn't really have torque specs on this, but I asked the guy at AutoZone. He says he's done like 100 of these, and he said just run it in as far as it'll go. So we've got this tool. We're just gonna send it. You're supposed to actually run it up in there until the copper washer starts to give. And you're supposed to feel it just kind of give. And you can look around and see, I believe that that is what has occurred. Now, we just need to do the same procedure, copper crush washer and all, to the drain plug on the scavenging area. That should be good. Now, we can lower the car down and begin the fill process. I'm gonna leave the under tray off during this process in case there's any leaks or anything like that. You're gonna definitely want access to this area. I know it's gonna be tempting to put it back on, but trust me, leave it off until you know everything looks good. So let's lower the car down and put some oil in it. All right, it is oil fill time, and I have gone with Mobil 1 10W40. Now Maserati actually recommends 5W40, but this engine is really high mileage, and it's got a lot of slop in it for an Italian motor. So the 10W40 should help take some of that slop out. It takes about 8 quarts, so let's put about 7 in and see where we stand. All right, so we've added our 7 quarts into the engine, or into the reservoir, I should say. Now, the part that differs from a wet sump oil system, whereas you would just be done after you added the oil, you need to actually start the car now. And you have to let it warm up and get up to temperature and then check the level, and you need to add an additional quart, or up to an additional quart. Part of the thing that makes me nervous is that for a split second here, actually a couple of seconds, this engine is going to be bone dry of oil, which I guess is why they call it a dry sump. Not really, but it does definitely put the dry in dry sump. So let's fire it up, let this thing idle and come up to temperature, and continuously monitor the oil level while adding some in as necessary. All right. Turn the battery off. Oops. Luckily Maserati thought of this. They had a quick disconnect in here. So far so good. Take a quick peek underneath. Nothing's spraying, so that's good. Handbrake's set, we've got chocks. It sounds good and it sounds smooth, but we're gonna have to let it get a little bit of heat in it before we can accurately check the level. All right guys, it's been even more minutes since we last checked in. The fans have cycled a few times, which means this engine is up to temperature. I've added a little bit more oil, but let's check it now that we're sure everything is fully warm. All right, as you can see here, we are still just barely at minimum. So we've done it. We've successfully changed the oil in a dry-sump Maserati. Let me turn this off so you can hear me, and we'll talk about how that went. All right, guys, we have done it. We have successfully changed the oil in a dry-sump V8 Maserati engine. Now, I have a little bit of oil all over me, but I think that was this Italian car's way of spitting on me for not taking it to the dealership. A procedure that I thought was impossible at home is quite possible. The only nerve-wracking part was really starting the car up, knowing that it was bone dry, but after that, it was just waiting, idling, listening, and adding oil. Anyway, that is gonna do it. My name is Elliott. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the other normal YouTube stuff, and I will see you on the next video.